Hi, my name is Mark Dixon. This is my final project, Ballin around the world. First off, I just want to apologize if this is a little bit difficult to see clearly. I ran into some issues while trying to upload onto YouTube. Um, and like everything else this semester, I kind of had a plan, ran into a problem, then had to find some workarounds. But ultimately, I'm here, so it kind of seems like everything worked out okay anyway. I will be posting a clearer version of this on Canvas, so that way you can look at that if this is just too hard to see. But moving on. So, top of the key, my question. So, my question was, has the NBA's increased involvement in trying to grow its global brand coincided with an increase in international representation? I ran into this question while I was watching the NBA playoffs. I started to realize that there were so many players that were out there, like Pascal Siakam, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, all players that were from different countries that were performing at the highest level. In fact, all three NBA finalists, none of them were born in the United States or of U.S. nationality. So it was really cool to see that this is starting to become something that the NBA has been working towards and seems to be coming to fruition. So my ultimate question was, how has the international representation in the NBA changed since 2004? And how many international players have been active this season? How does that compare to the past year, 2004? And how many countries have had their representation in the NBA, have had been represented in the NBA this season compared to 2004? I use 2004 as a reference point because I can't say every year how it's changed, but as you'll see, I actually chose 2004 for a reason. The 2004 was the year that there were officially 30 teams in the NBA, and for that reason, the number of players has been pretty consistent since this point. It's been hovering around 500 players, 15 players per team, and then there are a few that are added and subtracted throughout the course of a year. And then also the NBA founded NBA Cares in 2005 between the seasons. Um, and that was just a really big step in the NBA kind of marking its commitment to growing its global footprint as this new organization really took over the NBA's national and international charity and outreach programs. So it was kind of the NBA really putting their money where their mouth is when they said that they wanted to grow their international brand. And this kind of brings up both a moral and a financial component to this. The moral component being, well, it'd be great to see if there have been more international players playing, because you're giving people different backgrounds, platforms to really make money, talk about issues and different things like that, and kind of putting these different ways of life up on the national stage, but also financially, the NBA has been putting money into NBA Cares, and we want to see, hey, have there been tangible results? Has this organization been actually successful? So drawing up the play, I imagine, so this is my plan. I imagine this is almost impossible to read because of how blurry everything got. Again, I'll put this in Canvas so you can see a little bit more clearly. So I started out with a country shapefile, a list of NBA players for 2004, and a list of NBA players from 2022. I got this data from where did I get it from? From Basketball Reference, um, and it really just has all the information, stats and player nationality. All that information is all there. First, I took the information I had for the players and grouped by country of birth. At that point, I was really just trying to get an idea of how many players were from each country. And then I did a join with the country of birth with the country shapefile. This ended up giving me a new file that had an attribute table that kind of looked like a name of a country, the number of players that were born in 2000, that were playing in 2004, that were international, and the number of players who were playing in 2022 that were international. From there, I created a new field called international shift. I made it equal to the number of players in 2022 minus a number in 2004. to really get an idea of how that international representation has changed over the period of time. And then I created a choropleth map using the graduated colors to really show that information off. So this wasn't exactly a layup. While the plan seemed super simple, it wasn't as easy to execute. I ran into a couple issues where nationality, well, using nationality or birthplace. Ideally, I want to use nationality, but because the words like German or Brazilian were different than Brazil or Germany, birthplace was a little bit easier to use effectively and join with the countries. Um, and then I also ran into the issue where some countries no longer existed because I was using 2004 data. Some of the players were born in the 80s in East or West Germany or other places in that same kind of that were similarly not named the same thing anymore. So I kind of had to go into that and manually update some of that information. And then finally, scaling, always a problem when it comes to maps, trying to find the exact right CRS to use to kind of show off this information in the most effective way. So here's my map. It looks very similar to the election map that we made before. That's intentional because I thought that map was pretty cool. You can see anything in red represents a player decrease, and as the red gets darker, that's a greater decrease. And any in blue represents a player increase, and the same logic applies. Any country that is in white did not have representation in either years, and countries that are in gray have had representation in both years. It was just equal in both years. I decided to go with this showing it off this way because I thought that showing the countries in white would really give an idea of how much of the world there still is that hasn't had representation in the NBA. Even though we've seen a great increase, I still want to show off that there's plenty of places that are still not represented in the league. And I think ideally I was going to use green and red, but honestly, I think that the blue and red works better, especially considering that there are people who have issues with red green color blindness. So I thought this would be the best. And like I mentioned before, basketball reference is where I got all this information from. Uh, so like I mentioned, scaling is kind of an issue because a lot of the countries that I showed before are super huge, and those are all the red ones, and then the blue ones are the very small ones. So it makes it seem like by land mass that there's almost equal number of representation lost as gained. But we look a little bit closer at in continents like Africa, we can see that there's actually been enormous amount of progress made by the NBA on this front. Um, in particular, Nigeria has seen a drastic increase in number of players in the NBA. Other places like Cameroon, Egypt have also seen increases. And you might notice that I have basketballs on some of these countries. Those represent countries that were not represented at all in 2004 that now have representation in the NBA in 2022. So it's really kind of showing off like these countries had no players. They would have been white in 2004. But now in 2022 they are blue because we've actually seen that they've had representation now. And this is the same thing, but for Europe. You can see Italy and Denmark, other countries like that have now had players that didn't have players in the NBA before, and this really represents a huge shift in this representation in this area, especially in Eastern Europe. Starting to see players like Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic. Um, who have come from these Eastern European countries in the Euro League and have actually transitioned into the NBA and are some of the best players in the NBA. And that just kind of goes back to show how important this representation is. We wouldn't be able to see people like them, people like Giannis or Joel Embiid. Like we wouldn't see any of them if the NBA didn't really start to try to do this outreach to start increasing their global brand and diversifying starting to diversify things. And those are some of the biggest, most influential players today, and also a lot of the youngest players today. Um, the NBA has really kind of created a crop of really good, diverse group of people that are going to be the faces of the league, and if they aren't already. All right. So I asked some questions at the beginning, and here are here is the answer, and here are my answers. Um, so the international number of international players today is up to 143 from 89 in 2004, 60 more, almost a 60 player increase. And while that might not seem that huge compared to the only 500 players in the NBA, that's a huge number of players now added on the global stage from different countries. Countries represented today is up to 50. It was 31 before. That's again, another huge change, another huge increase in the amount of representation, and something that I know the NBA is definitely going to want to keep increasing as time goes forward. The countries that have seen the greatest increases are our neighbors from the north, Canada, 19 increased by 19 players. I mean, that's enough, more than enough for a team. France has seen 11 players increase, and Nigeria has seen 9 players increase. I think Australia has seen 8. And the only country to lose more than 2 players was Brazil. It's down to 3 players from what it was in 2004. Um, but there still are 2 players in the NBA from Brazil, so it hasn't completely lost its representation. And these are a list of all the countries that are newly represented. So any country that would have shown up with a basketball in the previous slides is listed here, and you can see there are a ton of countries now with that are being represented uh, newly in the NBA. And that's honestly um, all the quantitative information at least for me, I need to say that this has definitely been a real success over the past 18 years and trying to grow their global brand and really getting the best players, regardless of where they're from, onto the court. And this is really cool because these players are going to be super influential for younger people from all across the world. So anyway, that's my project. Kind of just closing thoughts about like how I feel like the semester went overall. Um, I really think that over the course of the semester, I learned to try to dial back some of my additional words and things that I want to add to my maps. As I started to realize that it's kind of a situation where often less is more. I really need to really starting to understand how to use a visualization to impart a message, but without, you know, punching the audience in the face with it. I have to make sure I respect the audience to be able to understand what I'm trying to impart, even though I still need to be clear. I also started to understand the importance of perspective, specifically with the different CRSs that we used. Um, Information looks a lot different depending on how you choose to show it off and how you choose to kind of group that information. So it's kind of a great power must also come with great responsibility situation where you can't just show show data and try to warp it to what you want it to show. Um, as for if there is a future in GIS for me, if you asked me that 3 months ago, I would have told you absolutely not. However, over the course of this semester, I've really, really found this and what we've been doing to be very interesting. I like that you can show a map to anyone across the world and very simply kind of get a point across to them. So I'm definitely not counting this type of work out of my future. And I already had an idea of going towards data analytics and data science. And this is kind of just another tool in my belt as a direction to move towards with really showing off data in new, impressive ways that are substantial and really get a point across. Anyway, that's it. I think I've gone very much over what my expected amount of time was, but thank you for a great semester, and I guess I won't talk to you later, but bye.